welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I thought I would talk about my top 10 favorite TV shows of the past decade. I've got a few sort of end of decade videos coming up, but I thought I'd start with this one. I feel like the past 10 years is when TV has really been taken up to a whole new level. It probably started in the mid 2000s, 2005, 6-ish, and it's really just skyrocketed from then. The quality of the content, the sort of stars they're able to get to star in television shows is unlike anything from any time period before. I can remember the 90s and the 80s, like, you never saw a big movie star in a TV show. That was sort of a medium that was looked down upon, and if you were a serious actor, you were in movies, not in TV shows. And then slowly that started to change. I think one of the first times I can remember a big movie star going into a TV show was probably Kiefer Sutherland in 24. And from then, like, now I saw a trailer for a TV show that's coming out on Apple Plus. Apple Plus, is that what it's called? I don't know. But on the Apple streaming service that's coming or has already come. And it stars like Jennifer Aniston, Reese Witherspoon, and Steve Carell. Like, there's just big stars everywhere nowadays. So these are my top 10 favorite with a couple honorable mentions. Now these are just my faves. So I'm not trying to say these are without a doubt the best shows, but they're the ones that I connected with the most or hit me the hardest or stayed with me the longest, things like that. So we're just gonna jump on into it. I got my notebook here. I made a note last night of the shows. So number one we're gonna start with is going to be Fleabag. Fleabag is an Amazon Prime show. Season 1 came out in, I believe, 2016, and then there were 3 years in between season 1 and season 2, with season 2 coming out just a few months ago. And this is one of the best shows I've ever seen. It's not for everybody. It's a little raunchy, but it was written and created by a woman named Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and she is just an absolute treasure. She's so smart. She's so funny. Her writing is so clever and so gut-wrenching. I love her, for one, and I love the show. It makes me laugh out loud almost every episode, and season 2 is just an absolute masterpiece in television, and the storyline, everything. And from what I've heard, this is the end now. There's season 1, season 2, and that's it. In fact, it was originally only going to be 1 season. But then Phoebe had this idea about the priest, which if you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about, the storyline with the priest, and so she decided to make a season 2, and I'm so glad she did. Just an absolute gem of a show. The second show on my list is The Crown. I've enjoyed this show so much. I've always been really interested in shows and books and movies about the royal family. Growing up in Newfoundland, you know, we were the last to join Canada, and, you know, we were more connected longer to England. Like, my grandfather was almost a teenager before Newfoundland joined Canada. So growing up, that was still a big part of, like, especially my grandparents, and especially my great-grandparents. They had a lot of memorabilia, a lot of books. It was something that was very important to them still. And maybe that's got something to do with it, but I love it. And I loved The Crown. Number 3, I have a straight-up comedy, and it's a Canadian television show. It's on Netflix if you want to watch it. It's a CBC show, so it airs on the CBC first here, and then it goes up onto Netflix, and that is Schitt's Creek. It's just one of those shows that is straight up good old-fashioned hilarious. So it's created by Eugene Levy, who for sure you know from so many movies in the 90s and whatnot, and his son Dan Levy, who, when you look at Eugene and Dan Levy, it looks like the same person in different time periods because they look so much alike, it's almost startling. And so anyway, it's about this family, a wealthy family, the Roses, who lose everything. And they end up having to, it's the mom, the dad, and 2 adult children who, like, because of their wealth and privilege, are kind of stunted and they kind of act like teenagers, and they have to move into this tiny motel that, for somehow, in liquidating everything, they find out that they own this motel in this tiny town called Schitt's Creek. And so they have to go there and live there and be amongst the people, and it's so funny. And it's also so heartwarming. It's just such a good show. And if you haven't seen it, you have to check it out. If you like lighthearted comedy, it's so good. It's 10 out of 10. Next up, I've got, of course, no list would be complete. I feel if you watched this, no list would be complete without it. And that's Game of Thrones. I know the final season that just ended in April or May or June this past spring. I know that last season was very polarizing and people either seem to have loved it or hated it. But I feel like no matter what your feelings on that final show, if you watched Game of Thrones, you loved it, and we all loved it. And for that reason, that's at the tip top of my list, because that show kept me on the edge of my seat every week. It would stay in my head the entirety of the week. I would just be thinking about it nonstop, thinking of theories, wondering what was going to happen next. I just couldn't get enough of it. So, Game of Thrones for sure. Next up, another sort of heavy hitter, and that's Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad was perhaps the greatest show of the last decade. It was so good. So good. For anyone who doesn't know, I feel like everyone saw Breaking Bad, but if you didn't, Breaking Bad is about a man named Walter White, who, you know, is your average, everyday kind of guy. He's a school teacher, chemistry teacher. He's got a wife and a couple of kids, or one kid when the show first starts, and he finds out he gets cancer, and he is desperate to find a way to ensure that after he dies, his wife and kid are going to be okay. He wants to leave them in such a state that they can care for themselves and keep living the lifestyle that they're accustomed to without his wife having to, you know, break her neck to try to maintain it. And what ends up happening is he starts making meth. And it's such a good show. It, you know, it didn't run for too long. It ended before it, you know, people started getting tired of it. It really went out on a bang. And it's so good. And if you haven't seen Breaking Bad, you have to watch it. Okay, next on my list is kind of a personal, to me, favorite. Maybe this wouldn't make many other people's favorites lists, but that's Anne with an E. I love Anne of Green Gables, the story. I love the movie. I love all the adaptations. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this, because there's always a little bit of hesitation when something you love is getting made again. But it was great. It did it for me. I thought the entire cast was lovely. I liked the slightly darker spin on it. I thought it was great. Really great. And I'm waiting now for season 3 to come out on Netflix. That comes January 3rd, and then it's done. But I've loved it so much. Next up, we have Barry, which was HBO, or is an HBO dark comedy starring Bill Hader. And Bill Hader is just the best. He's one of my favorite comedians. And I loved getting to see him in a leading role. I feel like so often Bill Hader's like the best friend, you know, the sidekick. But I always said he had such leading man potential, and it was so good to see him in this role. And it's a great comedy. Next up, this show, also from HBO, was one that took my breath away, especially the first season. It was so good. And that is Westworld. And that stars Evan Rachel Wood, and the first season starred also Anthony Hopkins. Now, I mean, can you go wrong with Anthony Hopkins? Probably not. But it's about this futuristic world where there's a theme park. And if you're wealthy, you can pay a lot of money to be put into this theme park. And so it's sort of like a, not virtual reality because everything's real, but the world is populated with robots. And it's kind of a Wild West scenario where you can kind of go in and live out your fantasies. You know, there are prostitutes and there are people, you know, you can kill people and be intimate with people, and they're all robots, so there's no, you know, they just get repaired and put back out. But as time goes on, we begin to see that the robots seem to be getting a bit of
what's the word I'm looking for?
Self-awareness, and that is starting to change things, and it's very interesting. Season 2 was also good. But season 1 was so good, and season 3 is coming up. That looks like it's also going to be so good, and that also is going to be starring Aaron Paul. Speaking of Breaking Bad, he was Jesse Pinkman. Let's see what's next. Next, I have Girls, which was another HBO show, and it was, I think, created by and starring Lena Dunham. And it was just a really interesting show. It was a half-hour show, once a week, very short. A lot of the characters were very unlikable, but there was just something about the writing and the way it was all put together that I really enjoyed. And I know Lena Dunham is another one of those people that can be kind of polarizing, but I enjoyed the show, and it was one of my faves. And my final favorite that I'm going to be putting in here is going to be Downton Abbey. I love period pieces. I love historical drama. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I would be remiss to not add it to this list. It's just such a feel-good show that also had some really intense moments, a lot of heartfelt moments, a lot of beautiful moments, and I just absolutely loved it. So those are my top 10 favorite shows of the past decade. Now I do have some honorable mentions. One is going to be the also HBO show. There's a lot of HBO shows on this list, which tells you a lot about HBO, right? Now this show that I'm going to mention, it just finished airing its first season. So I almost put it on the list because I thought it was a really strong first season, but where it was just the first season, I thought I better wait. Maybe that'll be a next the next decade's video 10 years from now, but that's Watchmen, and it was such a strong season. It was so good. It was so good. Jeremy Irons is in it. Can you go wrong with Jeremy Irons? I don't think so. And it's based, you might have seen a movie in 2009, I think the movie came out, and it's based on comic books. So this is kind of a different take. It's not a sequel to the movie or anything like that. It's a different take on these characters and everything. But it was so good. I don't know why I keep smacking my notebook. I'm sorry if that's loud. It was just fantastic, so good. And the final show that I want to give an honorable mention to is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. That's on season 3 right now, and I enjoy it quite a bit, but season 1 I loved. Season 2 kept kind of losing my attention, and now I'm back in it for season 3, and I really do enjoy it, but not quite enough to put it on the list. So there you go. Those are my favorite shows of the last decade. Hard to believe that we are getting ready to move into a fresh new start, as every new year is, of course. Coming up in the next little while, not this week and probably not next week, maybe it's just gonna be a random video on this channel and not a book talk video, but I'm gonna be talking about my favorite books of 2019. I was going to do of the past decade, but there's no way I could narrow that down. There's been too many books read. I know I'd forget some, so we're just gonna go with the favorite books of 2019. Can't wait to talk about those with you guys. Anyway, I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a fantastic New Year's. Be safe if you're going out with friends or family. Just be safe. That's the most important thing. And I will see you guys again real soon. Bye.